Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into an incredible story. It's about a huge IT transformation at a global financial institution.
Yeah, and this isn't just your typical lift and shift to the cloud story.
No, not at all. It's like a blueprint for how a really complex organization can actually change its core technology. So if you're in IT leadership, architecture, or managing big projects, this one's definitely for you.
Absolutely. We're looking at a real success story here. They brought together agile, lean principles, and a cloud-native approach. And they used it to modernize some really old, entrenched legacy systems.
And the scale was pretty massive, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. The source we looked at mentions migrating over 72 terabytes of critical data. That's huge. Plus, retiring more than 25 old systems and getting Agile working properly across a big chunk of the organization.
And the results they got were, frankly, amazing. We're talking an 81% cut in the costs of just keeping those old systems running.
81%.
Yeah. And reports that used to take days, now they take minutes. And maybe the most impressive part, they finished the whole thing 4 months early.
And with zero critical incidents during the actual switchovers. That's the bit that really stands out for me.
Exactly. So the mission for us today is to really understand how they did it. What were the strategies, the principles that made this work so well?
Right. What can you, listening now, actually take away and maybe apply to your own challenges?
It seems to boil down to that mix of agile, lean, and cloud-native thinking.
That's the core of it. But, before we get into the how, it's really important to understand the why. What problems were they actually trying to solve?
Good point. Okay, let's set the scene.
Yeah.
Before all this, the institution was struggling a bit. They had this massive tech debt. It was costing them something like $4.8 million a year.
Just in maintenance. Think about that. $4.8 million just keeping the lights on for old tech.
Imagine what else you could do with that money.
Yeah. Exactly. And it wasn't just the cost. Getting data out was painfully slow. You mentioned the reports. Waiting up to 48 hours.
Yeah, 2 whole days. In finance, that's just, well, it's not competitive, is it?
Not at all. And speed wasn't the only issue. Because their systems were so fragmented, they had real problems with things like data lineage, audit trails, all the stuff that's critical for compliance.
Which is a massive risk in finance.
A huge risk. Plus, their old setup just couldn't handle real-time data processing, which everyone needs more and more these days.
And remember the scale we mentioned. They had to move data for over 14 million customer records.
14 million. And the absolute top priority was doing this smoothly. No disruption to customers, no interruption to daily business. It was like performing open heart surgery while the patient was awake and running a marathon.
Okay, quite the challenge then. So how did they approach this mountain? You mentioned the combination. Agile at scale, cloud first, lean execution. Let's start with Agile. They used something called Safe-Inspired Agile Release Trains, or RTEs.
Yeah, safe scaled agile framework. So RTs, you can think of them as like teams of teams, multiple agile squads, all working together, synchronized towards the same big goals.
Okay.
And a really key thing they did was break down those old silos. They put business stakeholders right inside the RT, so everyone's aligned, priorities are clear, much less back and forth later on.
So they had these cross-functional squads, like cloud infrastructure people working directly with data migration folks and the application teams.
Exactly. Cloud infra, data migration, application rationalization, all in the mix together within these RTs.
And it wasn't just about taking off tasks in the sprints, was it? The focus was different.
Totally different. It shifted to delivering actual business outcomes in each sprint. Not just we finished coding X, but we enabled Y business capability.
Right.
That iterative delivery, getting stuff in front of the business stakeholders early and often for validation, that was crucial. Made sure they were always building the right thing.
Okay, makes sense. Now let's talk cloud strategy. It wasn't just dump everything in the cloud, right? They used this 6R strategy.
That's right, the 6 Rs. It's a framework to help decide what to do with each application. You've got rehost, which is basically lift and shift.
Okay.
Then refactor, tweak the application a bit to work better in the cloud. Revise is maybe a bigger change.
Right.
Rebuild is, well, starting over cloud native. Replace means swapping it for a SaaS solution, maybe.
And the last R.
Retire. Just getting rid of stuff that's obsolete or redundant. And that's a really important one, often overlooked. You have to be disciplined about actually retiring things.
And choosing the right R for each application sounds critical. Mess that up and you could end up worse off.
Oh, absolutely. That's a common pitfall. You rehost something that really needed rebuilding and you don't get the benefits or your costs go up.
The source also mentioned they built cloud landing zones on Azure using ARM templates. That sounds technical, but what's the key benefit there for people who aren't deep in Azure?
Right. ARM is Azure Resource Manager. Think of ARM templates as just code that defines your cloud setup. Your servers, networks, storage, everything.
Infrastructure as code.
Exactly. The big win is consistency and speed. You can spin up identical environments really quickly, reliably. No manual clicking, no configuration drift over time. It's much more efficient and less error-prone.
Okay, got it. And they also moved to an event-driven architecture using Azure Event Grid. What does that shift mean practically?
That's a big architectural move. Instead of systems calling each other directly, making them tightly coupled and brittle,
Right.
they communicate by publishing and subscribing to events. System A finishes something, publishes an event. Systems B and C, who care about that event, react. It makes everything much more loosely coupled, flexible, easier to scale, easier to change individual parts without breaking everything else.
Interesting. Okay, so that's Agile and Cloud. The third piece was lean execution. They use value stream maps to find non-value add steps. Can you give an example of what a non-value add step might be here?
Sure. Think about, say, the old way of getting a new server ready for a developer. Maybe it needed 3 different forms, approvals from 4 different managers, waiting time for the network team, then the storage team.
Oh, sounds familiar.
Right. So you map that whole process out visually. That's your value stream map. You see all the steps, especially the waiting times, the handoffs, the unnecessary approvals, those waiting periods, those extra sign-offs that don't actually improve the outcome. Those are non-value add steps.
And you try to cut them out.
Exactly. Streamline it, automate it, eliminate the waste. And they didn't just do it once. They tracked metrics like cycle time, how long a task actually takes, and lead time, the total time from request to delivery. They tracked these every 2 weeks to see if they were improving.
I also saw they had a stop-the-line policy. That sounds pretty bold, prioritizing quality over speed like that.
It really does. It shows a deep commitment. It basically empowers anyone on the team to halt progress if they see a serious quality issue.
Instead of just pushing forward and hoping to fix it later.
Precisely. Fix it now when it's cheaper and easier. It builds quality in from the start. It might seem slower in the short term, but it avoids much bigger problems and delays down the road. It's a culture thing.
Okay, let's make this more concrete. Can we look at a specific example? The source mentioned migrating their customer master data. That was on a really old mainframe system, right? COBOL, 23 years old.
Yeah, that sounds like a classic high-stakes migration. You've got decades of critical customer data locked in an old technology. The business side must have been nervous.
I bet. Concerns about losing data or the migration taking forever with old-school batch processing.
Understandable concerns. So their approach here was really smart. First, they didn't just jump into moving data. They set up a dedicated data quality task force.
Proactive.
Very. They used tools Azure Data Factory, Azure Purview, to really profile, cleanse, and improve the data quality before they even thought about migrating it. Getting that data governance right up front was, well, absolutely critical.
Makes total sense. Garbage in, garbage out, right? Clean it first. Okay, so data quality addressed. Then the technical move. Did they automate that?
They did. They lean heavily on CI/CD pipelines using Azure DevOps, CI/CD continuous integration, continuous delivery, basically automating the build, test, and deployment of their data migration processes, the ETL, extract, transform, load stuff.
So less manual work, fewer errors, faster iterations.
Exactly. And another clever thing they did was create synthetic data sets. Realistic-looking data, but not real customer info. They used this to run full dress rehearsals of the migration in test environments.
So they could iron out all the kinks without touching the live sensitive data.
Precisely. Practice runs to build confidence and fix problems early. Then, when they did the actual migration, they broke it down using what they called data migration sprints.
Okay, applying Agile to the data move itself.
Yeah. Each sprint focused on migrating the data for just one line of business. This allowed them to really focus, validate everything meticulously against the old mainframe source, and critically get formal sign-off from the business product owner for that area before moving on.
So iterative migration with business buy-in at each step. Very smart.
It really reduced the risk and kept everyone aligned.
All right, now for the payoff, the results. You mentioned some earlier, but let's recap. Report generation time.
Dropped from 48 hours down to just 15 minutes.
That's insane. A 97% reduction. Imagine the difference that makes to decision-making.
It's game-changing. And the cost savings on legacy maintenance.
Yeah, that $4.8 million a year.
Down to $900,000. An 81% reduction, that money goes straight back to the bottom line or funds new innovation.
Plus, customer data accuracy went up significantly, right? From
Yes.
under 90% to over 99%.
89.5% to 99.2%.
Yeah.
That's huge for customer trust, for personalization, and obviously for compliance.
And provisioning new environments, getting developers what they need.
Went from 3 weeks down to 30 minutes. Think about that agility gain.
It's incredible. And compliance audit failures.
Dropped from 5 per year to 0. Completely eliminated. That's a massive risk reduction.
And just to reiterate, all this finished 4 months ahead of schedule, 0 critical incidents during the cutovers. It's an amazing scorecard.
It really is. It shows what's possible when you combine the right strategy, the right tech, and really disciplined execution.
But crucially, this wasn't just a one-hit wonder, was it? They put things in place to make this sustainable, to make it repeatable. This adoption and sustainability playbook sounds important. They set up a cloud center of excellence, a COE. What does that actually do?
Yeah, the cloud COE is key for long-term success. It acts as like the central brain for cloud adoption. They define the best practices, create reusable templates like those ARM templates we talked about, set up the guardrails, the policies.
So ensuring everyone's rowing in the same direction, using cloud effectively and safely.
Exactly. It provides governance and enablement. They also had an architecture review board. That group helped standardize tech choices, like should we use Azure Kafka here or Azure Event Grid? Making those consistent decisions prevents the architecture from becoming fragmented again.
And they really embedded the Agile way of working, didn't they? Not just saying do Agile, but providing coaches, defining what ready and done actually mean for data migration tasks specifically.
That level of detail matters. You need shared understanding. Having embedded coaches helps teams really internalize the practices, not just go through the motions.
They also had a metrics dashboard, pulling data from Azure Monitor into Power BI.
Right. A single place to see how things were going. Tracking KPIs, key performance indicators like team velocity, how many defects slipped through, how predictable their sprints were, using data to stay on track and spot problems early.
And the focus on reusability seems key for scaling this. Reusable code for infrastructure, Terraform modules, reusable CI/CD scripts, ETL templates.
Absolutely. Don't reinvent the wheel every time. Build it once, make it reusable, let other teams leverage it. That accelerates everything. And they adopted GitOps principles too.
Briefly, what's the core idea of GitOps?
It's basically using Git, the version control system most developers use for code, as the single source of truth for everything, including your infrastructure configuration and application deployments. Changes are made via Git commits, triggering automated pipelines. It brings versioning, auditing, and automation to your whole environment.
Okay, so more control, more automation. And they didn't forget the people side, the change management, running training sessions, creating internal cloud migration champions.
Crucial. You can have the best tech in the world, but if people don't understand it, don't buy into it, don't know how to use it effectively, it won't stick. Those champions can really help spread the knowledge and enthusiasm.
And keeping that feedback loop going, with monthly retrospectives involving stakeholders, feeding lessons learned back into the process.
Yeah, that continuous improvement mindset, always learning, always adapting, that's vital.
So when you look at their final reflections in the source material, it's clear this was way bigger than just a tech project.
Oh, definitely. It was an enterprise-wide behavioral shift. They fundamentally changed how they worked.
Agile wasn't just an IT thing anymore. It became part of the culture, business side included.
That's the real transformation. The technology enabled it, but the shift was in mindset and ways of working, moving towards being data-driven, cloud-first, agile.
And the keys seem to be start small, prove the value fast, then scale smartly. And always, always keep the customer impact front and center.
Couldn't have said it better. Those principles guided the whole thing.
And the success here wasn't an endpoint, was it? It actually set them up for more modernization.
Exactly. The source mentions they're now applying the same model to tackle modernization in risk, compliance, customer analytics, other really critical areas. It created momentum.
Okay, so let's wrap this up. For you listening, what are the big takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, first, I think it really shows the power you get when you properly combine agile, lean, and cloud-native thinking for these big, complex transformations. It's the synergy, you know?
Yeah, not just doing one in isolation. And the benefits are clear. Huge cost savings, massive efficiency gains, better data, better compliance, and delivering value much, much faster.
Absolutely. But maybe the bigger thought to leave you with is this. Think about those core principles we discussed. That business-first mindset. Organizing work around outcomes, not just tasks. Really understanding your value streams to cut out waste.
How could you apply those ideas to your challenges, even if they're not strictly IT projects?
Exactly. What are the organizational muscle shifts, as the source put it, that you might need to make to achieve your biggest goals?
Hopefully, this deep dive has given you a framework, some real-world examples, to think about modernization and change in your own context.
Yeah, definitely encourage you to explore these ideas, agile, lean, cloud native, further, and see how they might unlock potential for you.
Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.